All right, John. We've taken a few minutes in this pre-conference to talk about your current focus, some goals, some additional support. How do you feel about going into this meeting with the principal?
I appreciate the conversation we had. I think it's helped me just to bring some clarity around the work that you and I have been doing, and to have a focus for the conversation when we engage my principal.
Yeah, I think this is going to turn out very well. So I'm looking forward to this process, and then we'll see you a little bit later.
Yeah, I appreciate the support.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Okay, so I appreciate the opportunity to meet with both of you today. I know, Mark, you are very committed to helping John have a great, successful first year here, and I am so committed to that as well. And I appreciate this opportunity kind of for us to come together and support you as best that we can. So I was in for a formal observation last week.
Yeah.
And so this is our opportunity to kind of debrief afterwards, and for me to share some of my thoughts and hear from you what your thoughts were on the lesson. And then Mark is here to be another listener and possibly chime in with his perspectives at times.
Absolutely.
But just again, I appreciate the work that you two are doing, and want to support that moving forward. And so this is just kind of my opportunity to talk to you about that lesson.
Well, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to hear your thoughts about what you saw in the classroom. I know Mark and I have really been working on a couple areas and trying to engage the kids. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what happened and what you saw in the classroom. So
Okay.
I'm excited about having that conversation.
Good. Great.
Yep, I think it's going to be great. So do you want to lead us off?
Sure. So a couple of things that were very impressive. Really, you're doing a great job with some things. I just want to point those things out right away. First, the rapport that you have with kids is just really positive. You really seem to enjoy being with them. You seem very approachable to them. I apologize for that. And they're responding well to you. So I just think that overall rapport seems very naturally. They've established that naturally.
Yeah, and I really feel like, I really worked hard in the beginning to establish that community, and to really try to get to know them, both all the students individually, but each class.
Great.
Each class looks a little different depending on who's in there and the time of day even. So.
Right. I wonder if we should turn that off. Another thing that was great was that you were really, I could see, you said that you've been working on engagement with one another, and that shows too. It was not just that you were, they were doing some reading during the lesson, but I love that you thought about how to have them engage with each other and use that Clock Buddies strategy to have them do that.
Yeah.
And by and large, I thought students really were engaged with the reading and then with their conversation, so I can see those efforts you're making too.
Yeah, and the Clock Buddies is something that Mark and I talked a little bit about as a way to be able to engage them and try to get that so it happens more quickly. And so in some of my classrooms, they seem to really move very quickly to those Clock Buddies, and they're engaged. And I really feel like that's helping them to have some more ownership of the learning process, but also getting them up and talking. So I think that's something that seems to be working.
Good.
John's done a nice job of being inventive about which Clock Buddies get together and how they get together, so he keeps moving them around so they're not with the same people as well. So he's really done well with that.
Yeah, great. And that activity is also a great form of formative assessment for you, because you're able to then walk around and hear the conversations that they're, I think in that lesson they were having to generate some questions about the reading they were about to do. So you're walking around and hearing what they were sharing with each other.
Sure.
Probably was a great way for you to gauge what they were thinking about and how ready they were for that activity.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a well-designed activity.
Any areas any other areas that you saw of interest?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, some things to consider would be, one might be pacing. You mentioned that they were very excited to get to those Clock Buddies, which is awesome. I think it's really clear that they did look forward to it. But I think you also want to make sure that things are moving along in a way that that engagement level stays strong throughout. There were some times when I noticed that towards the end of their Clock Buddy conversation, they were kind of waning off a little bit.
Okay.
So I think just being mindful of how long you're giving them to do those. So I think, just something to keep an eye on.
Okay.
I think is
So just being mindful. I hear you suggesting that I can just how much time is actually given
Mhm.
and being maybe even more clear about the task in that group for that time.
I
we're
think that would be
discussing.
great,
Yeah.
yes, yes. And then by your walking around, you can sort of gauge
Do
how they're
that.
doing too.
And do you give them a time frame? You tell them it's gonna be 2 minutes, 3 minutes, do you have a clock?
Well, it depends. I feel like I try to, and I think I could be more consistent with saying, you're gonna have 4 minutes to do this, and this is what I'm hoping that you're going to do in that time.
Right.
So, just
Okay.
being more clear with that,
Mhm.
is something I think I
Okay.
can continue to try to do.
We've talked a lot about anchor charts here too this
Mhm.
year. So any sort of visual reminder of what
Yeah.
they should be doing in those conversations, and you can prompt them to sort of reference that halfway through
Sure.
to make sure that they're getting through what they need to. That would be helpful.
Okay,
as well.
yeah, that's another good idea. Almost, providing them a mechanism or a reference point to be able
To stay on.
to stand, to look at.
Yep.
Yeah.
Another thing I wondered about, because students do come to sixth grade with such a vast array of reading skills
Sure.
and strategies in their toolbox,
They do.
Particularly at your level, they're coming from many different elementary school
Mhm.
experiences. I wonder if you've considered having them read a variety of texts that maybe would be more suited to their level of reading,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even aligned with their interest.
Yeah, because
Curious.
that's a good question. Because we all used the same text, and so I think
But
that
remember that you were just starting that concept, and so you wanted to make sure that they were all going to get that at the same level.
Yeah.
So that, and then
Yeah.
explain to Alex what you're gonna do next and how that's gonna move things forward.
yeah,
That's
well,
the next plan.
one of the things that Mark and I talked about, because I'm going to continue to work with the different kinds of texts. One of the things that we are wanting to do, or I want to do, is help them to be able to write persuasive essays. And so we were talking a little bit about trying to find different texts that could have different interests, so depending on what the topic it is, but I think also considering what level are those texts, having multi-level texts is part of our conversation. So,
And we found a good source.
oh yes, we were looking at the Newzilla website, around at least nonfiction text. You can very easily change the reading level. And so I thought that might be an interesting place to start. At the same time too, I am, if I were to be honest, I'm concerned about how do I continue to establish the routines and procedures, or that accountability that we were talking about, right? And also having everyone have different texts in the classroom.
Sure.
That's something I certainly want to be thinking more about, and I know that Mark and I will continue to talk a little bit about more. Yeah.
John and I met in a pre-conference, and so we went over a couple of these things that we thought would be important and where his next steps would be, what we would want to look forward to down the road. And so we talked about perhaps there's Gary Vaughn in the building is very good at differentiating text and having people doing different projects. So maybe we could find some time in which John could go see Gary and watch that. We could also look at a unit together and start to develop that unit together, and then thinking about how we would frame operationally, how people would maneuver within that framework. So we can talk about that theoretically and then practically as well.
Right. Great. Yeah, I think that's great work. Not small work. That's first knowing identifying what levels are appropriate for readers is one whole thing in and of itself. But then being so clear about the task, so that it's not dependent on that same text in the group is great thing to be focusing on this year. Wonderful. So when you consider sort of the things that we've talked about today, as well as the other things that you two are working on, what are some other, you just shared with me one of your next steps.
Yeah.
Kind of where do you see things moving forward this year, and what kind of support do you think we will need?
Yeah. Well, I definitely think one specific next step that we talked about is being able to see some examples or models of how other teachers are differentiating and using multi-level text in the classroom. I think would be a really helpful place to start for around support. And another thing I heard us talking about that I think, if you could write down, Mark, would be for me to be more mindful around my pacing. Just if I put that reminder down on paper, I think it will just help me to say how much time am I giving for particular tasks. And so I think just that will be a helpful reminder. I think those are the bigger things, just considering what Mark and I talked about and what we're talking about here.
Yep.
Can you think of anything else?
Well, is it possible, because I you know, the person we want him to watch isn't always, they don't always have the same free time
Mhm.
or off time, et cetera. So it would be nice if maybe we could get some help administratively to get a sub or a partial sub or just something
Absolutely.
that we
Mhm.
could have do over there.
Absolutely, I think that'd be a great use of her time, so I would be happy to cover, if you can
Okay.
shoot me a date that you have in mind, or
Okay.
I would be happy to help find new coverage.
Okay.
For sure.
Well, sounds good.
Mhm.
And maybe the next time that when you come into the classroom, you can give me feedback on how you think pacing is going, and maybe I can even invite you in to see how the multi-level text is going.
I'd love that,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, thank you for the time.
course.
Any other questions that you have, John?
No, not right now.
All right, you feel good about the conversation, everything, all right?
Yes. Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you both again.
Thanks.